dark from the beginning. In retrospect, that had been the wrong thing to ask. The beginning stretched back for the better part of Muiri's life, starting with Windhelm, the cold stone city on the ocean, where the girl grew up with some rich family as a sort of satellite or chaperone or pet companion to the two sisters. It didn't make too much sense to Vera. Her understanding of nobility was based on the two works of Shakespeare she'd read. It's not that books had been few exactly. Vera's mother had been a militant collector, and they had at least 25 between the two of them. 4 encyclopedias too. But after the Great Burn of 78, she'd been 17 half a lifetime ago. One had to be packing some serious firepower to get a hold of any, since anything that was ever printed had been claimed by then. The citadels probably had amazing libraries, but Vera was from the outskirts of Split City, formerly Toronto on her mother's maps, and it hadn't fared so well after the influx of climate migrants from the south. Mostly young, mostly white, mostly male, armed to the teeth and vicious as could be. A gleeful cruelty to them. And they had numbers on their side. Vera's mother had tried to cram as much education into her only child as she could, from early on, sensing the ruin to come, no doubt. She'd done her best, but she was a cartographer, not a historian. In any case, whatever Muiri's life with the Shatter-Shields had been, it was rosy until it wasn't. Someone had killed one of the sisters, and from there, things had gone to shit, and fast. Muiri had taken up with some bloke she met over drinks at a local tavern, and they'd gotten friendly. Vera couldn't blame her. Sometimes, these kinds of comforts were all you had, and you leaned on them because there was nothing else to carry your weight. It went on for a while, until the poor girl finally figured out that there was an agenda. Vera could have told her that from the start. When wasn't there one? But Muiri's life had been relatively simple up until then, all things considered. So Markarth and Bothela hadn't been a vocational choice exactly, but a matter of picking up the pieces, trying not to slash herself open on them in the process. Vera could relate. Once Muiri was all out of words, they sat quietly in the dimly lit room, the low rumble of the immeasurably vast, abandoned guts of the city vibrating through the walls of the apothecary, like a great beast snoring in its sleep. Vera wondered idly if something like this would one day come to her former world. New life built on old detritus, with little inkling of what came before. Nothing but myths and mystery, stories of something that was there first, but vanished in the blink of an eye, and whose purpose was as unfathomable as it was lost. It was a comforting thought, in a way. Some things were best forgotten. "How far along are you?" she asked, her arm around Muiri's shoulders. There was a time when Martha held her just like that. Over the same damn ordeal, too. It wasn't quite the same, mind. They had found a stash of Plan B, expired on a college campus, cordoned off because of the radiation. Their Geiger counter said it was safe enough if they didn't come too close to where the collider had been. And the student health center miraculously left mostly intact because of the packs of feral dogs. Martha, still bright as starlight under the grime of their shared flight from the ruins of their home when they finally decided, over a shared bottle of moonshine, that this just wasn't livable. Martha, before the pneumonia took her, antibiotics hadn't worked for 20 years. So it was a death sentence most of the time, and they both knew it. The winters had gotten bad, what with the Gulf Stream not doing its thing. Muiri sighed, rubbed her face with both hands. It's been 4 months since. She trailed off, clenched her hands over the soft curve of her belly, where the fabric of her dress hugged the skin. Since you came to Bothela? Yeah, not. Since Muiri and the asshole who got her with child fucked last, more likely, Vera guessed. That didn't mean a thing in terms of the pregnancy. Muiri could have gotten knocked up the first time they did it, for all she knew. She tightened her arm around the girl's shoulders. Muiri huffed a sigh, exhausted from the toil of nocturnal admissions. She slumped, burying her face against Vera's neck. A safe haven, however temporary. I had little choice. Pain mixed with anger, an old festering boil. You have to let it drain, love. It won't serve you. It won't serve you. They turned me out. Vera nodded against Muiri's hair. Have you told Bothela? She forced her voice into a steady beat, practical even, just another hurdle to take care of. It was better than asking the obvious question. Why hadn't Muiri remedied the problem earlier? The alchemy of this place was. It was sophisticated, and more than Vera's world could ever offer. Imagine the thousands of plants, every single one of them potentially useful. How did you get your mind around such richness? Muiri straightened, smoothing her hands over her skirt. She won't let me work with poisons if she knows I'm with child. Thank the divines, I didn't have the morning sickness, but I won't be able to hide things much longer. She paused, turning it over in her mind. And without the poison work, that's as many as 6 orders out of 10. At least, Vera hummed in agreement. Over the past month, she'd gotten the sense of how Bothela ran her business, based on the ingredients she'd been tasked with bringing back. You had your love potions, aphrodisiacs and stimulants, some vasodilators too, she guessed, mostly bought by the wealthier men of Markarth. Bothela liked to joke about how it gave them a bear's temper, but the joke was only a thin veneer that made the underlying truth easier to swallow. The violence of Markarth ran deep as its vessels of blood and silver. Then you had the restoratives, but those were cheap. Not because the ingredients were easy to procure, but because Bothela had an ethics, a sliding scale that made the basic potions, the stuff that cured the colds and the fevers and the bruises and scrapes, easy to purchase even if you didn't have much gold clinking in your pocket. Mining town and all that. And then you had the poisons. It wasn't like the poisons you'd think. Not the stuff that might kill you outright after one sip or tainted wine. Not like in the stories. No, poisons were subtle. Clinically induced ulcer. Clinically induced kidney dysfunction. Slow things that worked over years of subtle ingestion, drained you little by little, unobtrusively, with plenty of room for plausible deniability. A bad drinking habit, a poor diet, a habit of smoking after your meals, things you had to brew on the regular for the right patron. It'll be over in 6 months, give or take. Vera tried to sound reassuring despite the questionable guesstimate. Muiri's belly, now that she could see it, looked firmly into the 2nd trimester. Then it'll be lactating if you wanted to keep it, but just, don't taste the potions. See, Muiri's gaze turned distant, trained on a murky future she couldn't see through. I can't. Why didn't you go to Bothela earlier? Not like that was going to help now. What if you did? Keep it, I mean. Muiri shook her head vehemently, and then slumped against the wall, drained and lost. Now, this is Markarth B, and I haven't got the money to raise a babe, not even if I work myself to the bone. Bothela pays me what she can, but Bothela's business was doing all right. But they weren't exactly rolling in gold, what with Yngvar coming by every few days to skim off the top. Unless someone took it upon themselves to overthrow the Silver Blood stranglehold on the place, things weren't likely to change in the immediate future. Fair was fair. Markarth was a shithole, as pitiless as any place she'd known, just more organized about it. But Muiri hadn't done anything to rid herself of the pregnancy either, despite having the means. There's more to the world than Markarth. How much would you need to start over somewhere else? Muiri considered. I don't know. Right now, I can't even afford the carriage, never mind setting up in a new place. She nestled closer with an exhausted sigh. If I'd known half the alchemy I know now when I met Elaine, I wouldn't be in this mess. That's what galls me the most. She huffed a laugh, shaky, bitterly sardonic. If you knew half of what you know now, you'd have told this Dufant character to go jump into the sea of ghosts. Muiri chuckled, a bit more heartily this time, but the bleakness returned quickly. There was a maxim, one Vera's mother had a fondness for. Always put on your mask first. The etymology had to do with air travel, her mother had explained, though airplanes were as extinct as the elephants by the time Vera came about. But the origins of the saying didn't make it any less apt. Point was, you couldn't help someone else until you had firm ground under your own feet. But once you did, There was the other part of the expression, about helping the person in the seat next to you. Muiri was in the seat next to her, as far as Vera was concerned, but there wasn't much that could be done until she found something other than hot coals to walk on. She sat, calculating. The resources that her pay diverted could be rerouted back to Muiri if she managed to convince Calcelmo to take her on as a helper. She could still forage for the apothecary, simply selling the ingredients if she needed the extra coin. Muiri could probably hold on to her secret for another month, too, if she ended up carrying small or low. By then, Calcelmo would be back, and they could break the happy news to Bothela as soon as Vera found new employment, provided the Altmer didn't just tell her to scat. One way or another, she had to get that damn letter, and quickly. She made the decision, then and there, with Muiri's tears soaking into the collar of her worn shirt. We're going to figure this out. In the meantime, don't do anything rash. Muiri nodded muzzily, the emotional exhaustion finally catching up to her. Vera got up from the bed, plucked a few stalks of frost miriam from the dwindling bushel hanging over the hearth. They'd need to restock soon, and set the kettle over the fire. I'm going to wait up for Bothela to talk inventory. Get some sleep, all right? She pinched the bridge of her nose, trying to chase away the onset of a headache. Muiri picked herself up from the bed with a tired groan. Bothela is going to have my hide for this, Vera snorted. Are you kidding? She will grandmother you within an inch of your life once she knows, so best prepare yourself. Bothela's cynical carapace was mostly that. A defense against a world that kept trying to eat you. Beneath all the spikes and the chitin, the old woman was a softie. Mara, preserve me. I hope you're right. Vera watched Muiri walk out of the room, presumably to the privy. Yep, another month, and it was definitely going to start showing. And speaking of chitin, she had work to do if she was going to take up Undnar and his demonic-looking Undnar sidekick on their dubious proposal. By the time Bothela returned, Muiri had gone off to bed, and Vera had taken up the entire counter with her maps. With most of the satellites reduced to floating junk without anything to receive or interpret the data they still broadcasted, cartography had been one of Vera's most essential skills. She started mapping the Reach early on, while Lovinar was still alive. The old herbalist had supplied her with charcoal and parchment readily enough, his initial puzzlement at the contour lines Vera used to approximate elevation seating way to a sort of grumbling curiosity, then appreciation. Once he got the hang of the representational conventions she used, his short-term memory was shit, but when it came to abstract stuff, the old mirror was sharp. He helped her fine-tune, correcting mistakes, filling in the blanks, adding layers of history to the topography. Vera's foraging had provided the rest. Undnar had mentioned a cave. There were caves and caverns aplenty. The Reach was mostly limestone, a watery mess of underground erosion and man-made expansions on said erosion, of mines and karsts and Dwemer tunnels reaching into the mountain's bowels. Trouble was, most of them were occupied by all sorts of unpleasantness. What's this, girl? Are you planning an invasion? Vera looked up. The old woman thumped the jar of void salts she had brought on the counter and helped herself to some of the tea Vera had made, before collapsing into the carved armchair piled high with furs and cushions next to the hearth. So, did that nice young Nord manage to track you down? Vera cocked an eyebrow. If you mean Undnar, I'm not sure that young fits, and the jury's still out on nice, but yes, he did. Bothela took a sip of her tea, winced, and went to rummage for moon sugar in the cupboard. How Dwemer furniture managed to look both dainty and blocky was the real mystery of the vanished race, as far as Vera was concerned. You all look like young peoples to me. Get to my age. You'll see. Where's that? Ah, there. You two go through my moon sugar when I'm not looking. Good thing the Khajiit are still camped outside of town. The old woman settled back into her chair, stirring her tea with an oversized spatula. Undnar, that was the name. Curious fellow. And his Undnar hired hand. Still as fresh off the boat as you'd please with that armor and that accent. Vera knew better than to insert herself into Bothela's monologue. The old woman had a way of approaching a topic like a saber cat approached its prey, stalking it from a great distance. Quite the looker, isn't he? Had Muiri all giggly like a blushing maiden. Vera blinked. Ooh, Undnar, or the demonic-looking Undnar. She said. So, how long will you be gone then? Vera's eyebrows drew in confusion. Had Bothela stopped by the inn on her way back to collect some gossip? The old woman dismissed Vera's interrogative look with a wave of her spatula. Vorstag made a spectacle of himself again, I hear. I'm glad someone finally put that good-for-nothing in his place. But you, Bothela thrust the business end of the spatula in Vera's direction, might want to spend a few days outside the city. Why? Oh, this wasn't going to be anything good. Did something happen after I left? Why couldn't Vorstag just get eaten by bears? It's not Vorstag you need to worry about, girl. Bothela lowered her voice. I've been hearing things. About Undnar planning another raid. Oblivion swallow him whole. Been asking questions about anyone who's new. Her wrinkled face scrunched up in distaste or derision, the intricate tracework of her facial tattoo obscuring the exact flavor of her expression. I swear that Mer would crawl up his own arsehole if he thought he'd find the Talos worshipper in there. Vera snorted, despite the sudden unease. Once Lovinar had learned about Vera's less-than-Nernian origins, he had told her to always be mindful of two groups, the Thalmor and the Vigilance of Undnar. So far, the advice had served her well. We could send an anonymous report. It has come to our attention that Justiciar Undnar is harboring a Talos cult up his rectum. Bothela's dry cackles echoed through the chamber before the old woman brandished her spatula in mock threat. Hush, girl. There's a time for being clever, and there's a time for being smart. And the smart thing would be for you to take yourself out of the city until it all blows over. I have enough of a mess on my hands as it is, what with Muiri's bun in the oven and no husband to claim it. Oh. Bothela clicked her tongue against the roof of her mouth and shook her head, a sarcastic twinkle in her eyes. I'm old, child, not blind. Why do you think I hired you? Don't get me wrong now. You turned out to be a good investment. I wasn't lying to that Nord when I said you have a knack for finding things. But this is Markarth. We watch out for our own. Vera nodded. That much made perfect sense. So, that brings me back to that Nord and whatever he's looking for. How much did he offer to pay you? 350. Bothela quirked her brow. I haggled a bit. High price for a guide. Whatever he's looking for, it must be worth more to him than his gold. And what do you plan on doing with all that coin once you have it? If I have it, Vera thought, I want to pay off the guards and get Lovinar's letter back. Do you think it'll be enough? She sighed, rubbing her forehead. The headache wasn't going away. She needed sleep if she was going to meet Undnar for breakfast. The night wasn't getting any younger, closer to 500, unless you sweeten the deal. Though who knows? Perhaps the child god will find himself in a helpful mood. They won't hand it over with a pretty please, that's for sure. The alchemist paused, ruminating, thought about what I mentioned. Might cost you less than the guards. Ah, yes, Bothela's mysterious contact. There it was again. I have a feeling it'll still cost me, just not in septims. At least with coins, there are no strings attached. Bothela sighed. There are always strings attached, child. I can offer you a roof until you don't need one, but I'd sleep better if you had more than an old woman and a pregnant girl watching over you. You're still set on badgering that old Alt Mercadger once he's back? The memory of the soul gem tugged at Vera again, a phantom warmth in her palm. Yeah, he's no sweep roll, that one. Cantankerous old bat. Bothela stretched and set aside her empty cup. Vera grinned. I have some practice with that. You've been training me well. Watch that sharp tongue of yours, child, or the Hagravens might get it. Bothela tutted, her bony shoulders shaking with chortles. Vera folded her maps and stuffed them back into her knapsack. Bothela, what did you think of Undnar? Really? Something about him feels strange. You won't find 350 septims under a rock on the road is what I think. I'd lend you the money myself if times weren't so lean. The old woman leaned forward. He's asking you to take him around the mountains, not for your hand in marriage. Just don't lose your head over that handsome Undnar of his, and don't go tangling with the Forsworn. I think I can manage that much. Vera harumphed. If Undnar and his buddy wanted to go poke at Forsworn encampments, they certainly didn't need her to tag along. She would be more than happy to point out the locations, preferably from the adjacent mountain range, and be on her merry way. Bothela nodded. I'll brew you some potions for the road. Get some rest now. Something tells me you got a long day ahead of you.